Hello and welcome to the Ocean Impact Podcast Pitchfest 2020 series. I'm Nick Chiarelli, thanks for joining me. Late last year, OIO ran the Ocean Impact Pitchfest 2020. We were inundated with almost 200 applications from 38 countries and were blown away by the incredible breadth and quality of ideas and ventures that applied, all trying to make a positive impact on planet Ocean. Over the course of this Pitchfest 2020 series, we'll dive into the challenge and opportunity areas that each of the finalists are working on, find out about their unique solution, and discuss the key challenges and learnings they've encountered on their journey so far. We'll also discuss their why, their motivation for working towards a healthy ocean, what the road ahead looks like for them, and how you, the listener, might be able to support their journey. This week, I'm talking to Sara Andreotti. Sara has been involved in marine biology since the age of 16, when she started working as a volunteer at the Natural Marine Reserve of Miramare in Trieste, Italy. In 2008, she completed a Masters of Science in Marine Biology at the University of Trieste, and in 2009 she began working in South Africa to create a database of great white sharks based on photos of their dorsal fins. The project evolved to include genetic data for a PhD at Stellenbosch University, and after 6 years of fieldwork, Sara had managed to catalogue 426 white sharks from over 5,000 photos and collected more than 300 genetic samples. She was awarded a PhD for this research in March 2015. Today, Sara is the co-founder and chief operations officer of the South African-based startup SharkSafe Barrier. SharkSafe's Barrier's mission is to provide the tools for an environmentally friendly coexistence between sharks and humans. SharkSafe Barrier provides a novel and sustainable solution to shark and human protection through a patented technology that incorporates a magnetic field with a kelp-forest mimicking structure where sharks are deterred without affecting other marine life. SharkSafe Barrier is scientifically proven to deter both bull sharks and great white sharks, requires minimal maintenance, and in addition, the infrastructure over time becomes an artificial reef protecting marine life and enhancing biomass. In 2020, SharkSafe Barrier was one of a number of innovations featured in a proposal to the Queensland Government as cost-effective and non-lethal alternatives to the very outdated shark nets used at popular Queensland beaches. New South Wales and Western Australia being the other Australian states that are still using lethal shark nets. Shark nets are indiscriminate killers of a variety of marine life, including turtles, dolphins, whales and sharks, and the idea that they keep humans safe from negative shark interactions is not supported by credible science. I hope you enjoyed this discussion with Sara Andreotti on the Ocean Impact Podcast Pitchfest 2020 series.
Can't take the ocean out of me.
Good morning, Sara, and welcome to the Ocean Impact Podcast. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Special to be here.
No problem at all. No problem. I'm excited for this discussion, actually. It was one of the more unique initiatives amongst the Pitchfest finalists in that it directly it targeted a biodiversity problem, and within that, it actually directly targets the problem of sharks, and specifically, we're talking about what sometimes we refer to as negative human-shark interactions, and in Australia, this is a huge topic of conversation, and it has been for some time because we're one of the few countries in the world that has shark nets, which are intended, at least, to basically keep people and sharks separate in major populated areas. So we have them in Western Australia, and we have them throughout New South Wales and Queensland. And this problem, if you like, and this topic has been it's quite polarizing. There's a lot of people that want to see these nets gone, and you, Sara, are trying to solve that exact problem with technology, which is fantastic. So give us the the backstory about the product and tech and what you're trying to do?
Sure. Well, this problem we're trying to solve is exactly what you said, the shark net. And one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is thinking that these nets are being deployed at sea to keep sharks away from people. In fact, these nets are also called gill nets, and they are designed to kill as many sharks as possible, with the concept that the more sharks we're going to kill, the less encounter between shark and people we're going to see. And that is a concept that goes back to 1937. So we've got this going for decades, where with the technology we developed here in South Africa, we are trying to copy from nature what shark can recognize naturally as a barrier and keep them actually separated from people without killing marine life. Because that is the other problem with the nets. They are not targeting just shark. These shark nets are also killing a lot of marine mammals and turtles and dolphins. I mean, you name it. And what we are doing with that technology called the SharkSafe Barrier is merging two well-known shark deterrents. And one is the visual appearance of a thick forest of kelp, these large brown seaweeds that we have in South Africa. And white shark in particular, we don't like to get inside this kelp forest. So we biomimic that appearance of a thick forest of kelp. And then we use another shark deterrent, which is very large ceramic magnets. And magnetism is also deterrent for sharks because they have a sixth sense around their eye and around their nose that allows them to detect very minute magnetic and electric field. Very large magnet. You must imagine like a fridge magnet, but really big. And a lot of them in that pipes that looks like a thick forest of kelp. So when the shark comes, visually it doesn't like what he's seeing. That is where the biomimicry comes in. But if he comes too close, like within a meter of range, then the strong magnets pushes the shark away by overwhelming that sense that only sharks have. So that is the concept behind the SharkSafe Barrier. And we tested it and proved that it's quite effective. We never had a shark crossing it in all the tests.
So let's just paint the picture for the listeners, Sarah. It's, if I'm not wrong, we think about concrete blocks along the seafloor, and at, what are we talking, meter, half meter, 2 meter intervals. You would have a chain, I suppose, with a pipe that you're talking about.
Yes and no. Well,
no?
we tried chain. So we discovered that the sea is really good at breaking things. So the sea have been breaking our prototypes very effectively for the first 3 or 4 years before we got to a design that is strong enough to withstand the strong wave condition of, we call it the Cape of Storm in South Africa for no reason. And we tried chain, but the sea managed to open the shackle that was keeping the chains together. We tried rope, and then we had mussel eating through the ropes, and we tried fan belt. So we tried a lot of different material and system to attach this pipe. Now imagine a long black pipe that is attached to the bottom, and the anchorage depends to the seafloor because every beach is different. So if we have a sandy seafloor, then we have one type of anchorage. If we have a rocky seafloor, then we have something different. So the anchorage per se changes depending on how the seafloor looks like. And then you attach the pipes. The pipes are the same, irrespectively of the seafloor. The pipes is attached at the bottom and goes all the way to the surface and sticks out of the water by approximately half a meter in high tide. And then imagine that you have a row of these pipes that are about, and every second pipe, the pipe is magnetized. That way you have the external row of pipe creating this large magnetic field that also doesn't require any power source. Like I mentioned, it's like a big fridge magnet, a lot of them. And you have this external row of pipe, 50 centimeter apart. Then you have a second row of pipe behind it, and the pipes are just 1 meter apart, and they're staggered and don't contain magnets. Then you have another row of pipes, also 1 meter apart, also staggered. And then you have a fourth row of pipe. So the idea of creating a thick forest of kelp is why we have multiple rows installed, but also, although we did test the barrier to have as little as 2 rows and being still effective, for human safety, we want to be redundant. We want to have 4 rows of pipe. So we really have the appearance of a thick forest of kelp. And if by chance, 1 or 2 pipes break off during a big storm, we still have barrier that is intact, and we won't have holes happening. So that's why we have these 4 rows, and they're all staggered. And the pipes are also quite flexible. They have 2 components, shorter pipe at the bottom, a flexible joint, and then the longer pipe. So when the waves come, they do dance, creating an effect that looks a lot like a kelp forest, which was the whole idea.
Yeah, that's amazing. Tell us about where you've done your testing, Sarah. What species of sharks and what locations, and what were the results?
Well, we started this test in 2012. We did test a little bit at the time. So the first group of tests was to check which magnet works best. And that was Dr. Craig O'Connell's work in the Bahamas with the bull shark. Then Dr. O'Connell came to South Africa, and we worked together to check if these large magnets work with the great white as well. And then they work. And it was a very basic test. It made attached to it, and another one with a fish and a magnet attached to it. And then you count how many times the shark go and eat the fish without the magnet, and how many times it eat the fish with the magnet. And that shows that they don't like the magnet, step 1. Then step 2 was putting an array of pipes with the magnet inside to show and put fish on the other side, up current, so that the smell of the fish goes through the pipe and get dragged down current. So when a shark comes, he has 2 options. He can swim through the pipe, that is the shortest way to come to the fish, or he can swim around it and spend energy to go around our array of pipe to come to the fish. And every single time the shark would do that, instead of going straight, he would take the time to go around. So by showing we can modify the shark behavior, we thought that was enough, to start building this structure at sea. But then some other colleagues, that's how science works. We always have to complain and criticize other people's work, because that's a scientific work. Some colleague mentioned that we actually didn't prove that we can exclude shark from our area. We only prove that we can modify their swimming, but maybe if we create a large enclosure and we put the fish in between, inside the enclosure, the shark that has no option then going through the pipe will then go through the pipes. So that was another array of experiment in South Africa with the great white, and in the Bahamas with the bull shark, where we created enclosure and we put the fish in the middle and recorded the shark behavior, coming and going around our enclosure. That was, imagine a square that is maybe like 13 meter by 13 meter, so quite large, with a barrier all around and the fish in between, inside the square with the camera. And every time the shark would come, swim around, and then leave. So they definitely don't swim through these pipes. And that's why it took so long, because we were recording all the shark behavior, and then we got the results published in peer-reviewed scientific journal.
Gotcha. Sorry, you just cut out for a moment there, Sarah. Have I still got you?
Yes.
Yeah.
You do?
Okay. Excellent.
I stopped myself because I'm a scientist, so I can keep on talking about the science behind it forever. And I learned, once I started doing a bit of this entrepreneurship thing, that nobody cared. They just go, does it work? Can we sell it? And I'm like, but the ampulla of Lorenzini, the shark.
We want to hear both sides. I think there's listeners that are interested in the commercialization part and the innovation part, but I don't think there's a product without the science behind why it works. So, what are we here talking about? We're here essentially talking about looking after sharks and looking after people. But you've also articulated to me that, this isn't just looking after sharks, looking after people. This is also looking after profits, because around the world, we're spending a hell of a lot of money. Governments are spending a hell of a lot of money on this idea that they're keeping people safe with these nets that, by the way, arguably don't work. In fact, they're indiscriminate killers of all types of marine life. I think the statistic that you shared with me just prior to hitting record was that over a 20-year period in New South Wales up to 2017, if I'm not wrong, is that 4,000 marine animals were killed by nets. 60% were sharks and 40% were whales, dolphins, and turtles mostly.
And within sharks, I mean, not all sharks are responsible for human accident. The majority of shark species, and we're talking in like 500-600 species in the world, they are not harmful whatsoever. There are very few species that are involved with shark human incidents. And it just doesn't make sense in my mind that we're killing so many marine species because us as humans became so afraid about 2 or 3 top predators.
Yeah, and look, let's not even talk about the ecosystem benefits and the value that they provide for a moment. I mean, just looking at tourism alone, I mean, there's a staggering amount of income that's derived from marine life and from sharks. People want to interact with these animals when it's safe to do so, and around the world, it's big money. What's you shared some of these statistics earlier, and forgive me if I get some of these wrong, but there was a study that you found that talked about the value of an alive shark versus a dead shark. Can you step us through that?
So that was a study done back in 2015, where just for Palau, this island in the Pacific, they calculated how much a reef shark is worth to the ecotourism industry per year by being alive, by having people that wants to dive with it and being in the water with these sharks. And they calculated around $179,000 per year per shark. And they also look at how long one of these shark can live. And for a lifespan of this shark is about $1.9 million for the local community per shark during the lifespan. If they will kill the shark and sell it, is about $108, and then the animal is dead. So every study that look into the benefit of keeping these animals alive, financial benefit, not just the ecological benefit for the environment. Every single study is showing how an alive shark is a lot more worthy to be kept alive than to be killed and eaten up. For the white shark in South Africa, in the little Gansbaai town in the south of Africa, they also calculated that for the cage diving industry that started up in the late 90s or early 90s, just because they had this hotspot for white shark, in 2003, they calculated that animals were worth $4.4 million per year to the town. And that is a massive amount. And, there is also a domino effect. So that is how much money the ecotourism can make. But then imagine all of the, souvenir shop and bed and breakfast and restaurant becomes economical resource for the town that goes beyond just the tourism operator.
Yeah, we have a place, Port Lincoln, down in South Australia, which is a beautiful part of the world. But and I'd be interested, if anyone knows these statistics, reach out. I'd be interested to know what percentage of tourism GDP does the shark tour industry bring to Port Lincoln in Australia.
Yeah.
and similarly to the Cape Town region of South Africa as well. I think they're huge draw cards.
Yeah, and funny enough, when you speak about shark and tourism, it is very, you have very polarized opinion about it, because you have most of the people that have been seeing a shark underwater, all the diver community, they just can't wait to be in the water with a shark again, because they're such incredible, majestic animals to dive with. But then if you look at the general tourism and shark, then the polarized opinion is the sharks are keeping the tourism away. Little island in the Reunion, or the Reunion Island is a little French island next to Mauritius. And what happened there is since 2011, they started having more shark accidents than before. And they had to close the beaches. And they told people they cannot get in the water anymore. So since 2011, there was also a study there showing that every year this town lost, the whole island, they lost something around 20 million euro per year in tourism revenue. Because every time there was a shark accident, 40% of the booking disappeared. There was a drop of 40% of the tourism booking. So here is where, you have a bunch of tourists that really wants to see shark and another group that really don't want to see shark. So that is where I hope SharkSafe is going to provide a solution to keep shark away from the and keep the animals alive for the tourists that do want to play with them.
Mm. So tell me, Sarah, where are you targeting? I mean, are we talking about areas where there's an existing human shark interaction problem? Are they your target markets? How do you think about your target markets and who your customers are as well? Who ultimately will pay you for this?
So what we're targeting first are countries and council and municipalities where there is already money invested into killing the sharks. So South Africa has shark net and drumline that are also another fishing gear used to reduce the number of sharks in the area. And we have Australia and now Reunion Island and New Caledonia. These are all areas where the government is already spending money to kill shark as a management system. So we don't want to put the people that are killing the shark out of job. We want to put the people that are killing the shark to change the way they are doing their work. So instead of getting them to kill shark, pay them to clean the pipes of the barrier. They just need to change the way they're doing things. They already have the people, the boat, they have all of their setup in place, and they're already getting paid for it. So it's just changing how the so-called shark problem is going to be managed. So yeah, our clients are probably going to be local council, municipality, but also, hotel owner. If you have someone that owns hotel and has a beach and wants to keep his tourists safe and is willing to have a SharkSafe Barrier enclosure, that can also be a potential customer for us.
How do you see, or what do you see as the tipping point, Sarah, for this, for councils essentially to start taking action here? Because, I mean, in Australia, we've seen resistance and opposition to nets only gather momentum from a community perspective as people become more educated about the problem. I think social media has been really good because we can actually start to visualize the problem. We can see marine life caught in nets where there's Freedom of Information Acts which provide us with the stats around all this sort of stuff. But we're still seeing a reluctance from politicians to, I suppose, be gutsy enough to make the decision. I mean, is it a tipping point game? Do you think what's going to help us to get to the tipping point? And is it the sort of thing that we're, say, Australia makes a decision to look at non-lethal technologies such as yours, do other countries follow suit? Does it become a case of the dominoes falling over at that point?
Yes, I think that will be the tipping point for us to install the barrier on a beach and show that it does make a difference. It does keep the sharks away. It creates jobs for the local people that are going to look after the technology, and it will become a tourism attraction on its own. Just because, the moment you put something in the water, then you create some artificial reef scenario, and animals will start growing on the anchorage system. So if we will just put a barrier to protect one beach, wherever that's going to be, then we can prove that the technology is doing exactly what it is expected to do. And then it will be easier for the next municipality to take it on and go with it. And then the next, it should create a domino effect. I'm not expecting my work of convincing municipality to install it getting much easier, because that would be, be very much optimistic. But eventually, I think that can become how in the future we're going to manage sharks.
Yeah, I think we definitely need. I say that momentum's built with opposition to shark nets. We need to keep building on that momentum. I think there's always more that can be done and said, and more lobbying and more pressure put on our elected representatives. Probably worth mentioning that earlier or last year, our friend Andre, the producer behind Envoy Shark Cull, submitted a proposal that you were a part of, or you were one of the technologies mentioned in this report. He submitted a report to the Queensland government around a variety of non-lethal innovations that could replace shark nets. And the interesting thing that I found about that report was that it wasn't talking about just the idea about saving marine life. It was talking about how the economics stacked up. So it fully costed out a variety of different solutions that are here and now. We're not talking about, airy-fairy stuff that's in concept. We're talking about solutions that exist today that may have a CapEx, upfront capital cost associated with them, but over a reasonable lifetime, and I'm not talking, 100 years, I'm talking, 5 to 10 years. We're talking about getting payback from these things, or at least cost reductions from the cost to maintain the existing system of nets that we know aren't doing the job that the public think that they're doing. We're yet to see the Queensland government move on that report. But I think that's definitely the way to go. In my opinion, we've got to tackle the issue and lobby from every angle, and there needs to be. We need to talk the language that politicians are used to speaking, and that's jobs, that's economics, that's GDP, as well as the less harmful to marine life and protecting human life.
Yes, absolutely, and it must be a teamwork. It cannot just be us advocating for that to change. It must come very much, must be a sort of movement, a bottom-up movement happening, where a lot and more and more and more people ask for this way of tackling the shark issue to change. And I know I'm representing the SharkSafe Barrier, but personally, whatever system they're going to implement that will keep the sharks safe with it. There isn't a solution that fits it all. I think the barrier has very good potential for some areas, but every beach and every bay is different. So to tackle and find the most cost-effective and safe solution, depending on how the bay looks like, that will be the way forward, which is also why it was so difficult for me when they asked me how much does the barrier cost. And it's like trying to cost a bridge. It depends how big the river is and how strong the current is, and in our case, what the seabed looks like. We have to custom build this technology to be in harmony with the existing nature that we will find in each area. and then we can cost it. But yeah, I don't think there is that someone called the SharkSafe Barrier the silver bullet. And I think it could become the silver bullet for a lot of area, but doesn't necessarily need to be the only solution, as long as the shark don't get killed.
I love that attitude, Sarah, and it's probably a good segue for us to take a step back, if you like. So your number one priority is not to dominate the marketplace with this product. You're one of a number of solutions, and your priority is seeing it's the protection of sharks. So let's take a step back for a moment. Tell us where your love of sharks came from, and let's talk about your background as a scientist, and how you found yourself in this position now where you're driving a tech startup, if you like.
Well, that came by almost by chance, really. I love sharks, and I wanted to be a marine biologist since I was like 8 or 9 years old when I discovered the word and the job. And in my mind, I love the ocean, I love the animals. At 9 years of age, I learned for the first time that there is a job where they pay you to work with animals at sea. And I thought that was amazing. I want to do that. And I wanted to do that ever since. And then my schooling and my university up until the master in marine biology was done in Italy. But at the end of the master degree in marine biology, I met a South African conservationist. His name is Michael Ratzen, who had been advocating for the protection of white sharks since the mid-90s. And they've been doing all sorts of documentaries, swimming with the shark out of the cage and free diving with them, and showing how if you communicate with these animals correctly in the right condition, they're not the mindless killer machine that Hollywood wants us to believe. So I met him, and I saw that the guy can basically speak shark. He was communicating peacefully with the animals, and the animals were responding nicely. So I begged him to work with him because I was much interested in the shark behavior aspect. And then I found myself in South Africa doing shark genetic and population identification and population estimate, because a lot of other people was working on shark behavior. So it was really a request from the government to take up the genetic aspect of the study. And that is what my PhD was in South Africa, the University of Stellenbosch. So I'm a marine biologist at heart. And as I was working on the shark population number and the photo identification of the dorsal fin, taking genetic samples with Mike Ratzen, that is where Dr. O'Connell came to South Africa as well, testing his magnets with the sharks. And Mike Ratzen is the guy that was doing all the filming, free diving with the sharks. And he also realized that if you have a thick forest of kelp behind your back, the sharks won't cross it. So you could film them keeping the kelp behind his back, knowing that the sharks won't cross it. And that is where the SharkSafe Barrier idea started being formed, with Craig's magnet and Mike's kelp idea. And we had the first, kelp barrier concept designed back in 2012 with the magnets. Without the magnets, the concept goes also way back. But I found myself helping out with that research while I was doing my PhD, because I was in South Africa. I had access to the field work. So I was doing the diving, switching on the GoPro and doing that part. And then was tested and everything worked out. And in 2015, I finished my PhD. And the University of Stellenbosch, who patented the technology by then, asked me to sell it. and I was a bit taken aback, because I'm a scientist. So now you want me to learn business. And I have absolutely no clue of what business is about. I've been surviving on bursaries, when you get a bursary for a project. And then the money must finish at the end of the project so that you can ask for another bursary. Then I get into this new world when they ask me about my profit. And I'm like, what profit, what? What do you mean? What do you mean with profit? So yeah, it was a big learning curve to try and learn the wording and how the business world works. And strangely enough, I did a business accelerator program called Clean Tech in 2017, Clean Tech Open. And then I realized that actually there are some similarities in between science and business, and that allow my brain to sort of cope with it. And this business accelerator program was calling it validation. So validate everything. You think you have enough clients, but did you validate that? Did you check? Did you ask how many people wants to buy your product? You think you have a global market, but did you check that? And that is very much what science do. You need to collect the data first. You have an hypothesis, but then you have to collect the data. You have to analyze them. Then you get your result, and then you can draw your conclusion. And business-wide, only then you can make informed decision. So it wasn't that different as soon as someone mentioned it to me. And that is how I found myself doing what I'm doing now.
That's great. I mean, some people would say that running a startup is really a series of small experiments. And in fact, the term startup science is quite commonly used as well to talk about the range of experiments and tools that I suppose people would encourage founders to use on a daily basis, because when your resources are small, you can't afford to be wasting too much time heading in one course of direction, because it could be fatal finding out too late that wasn't the right course of action. So we test everything, we experiment, we come back and review those tests, we check all of our assumptions, and before we proceed on a course. And very much like science.
It is the same. And also being prepared for things to go terribly wrong, regardless of the effort. That's very much what happened during a PhD, mostly on genetics. Sometimes you don't know why your PCR machine is not giving you any amplification, and you wonder if it is because of the color of your t-shirt. Sometimes things just go wrong, and then you have to try it again a bit differently, and then it goes right again. So,
and was that the main crux of it? To decide to go down the business road here and commercialize this, was that really done with a view to avoiding the pitfalls of grant funding and applications for new grants and funding drying up? Was that a way to say, right, if we want to do this and we want to be successful and do this at scale, really the only way to do it is to find sustainable sources of funding, and that's by commercializing and working out who is going to pay for this?
Eventually, yes. That was also one of the reasons for going full force into building this company. Yeah. Because there are a lot of funding opportunities out there, but they normally require days of filling up application form. And the amount of funding that you get are really tiny. So you can really do small, very tiny projects all at once. It's very difficult to get large funding for shark research. I mean, if I was in human medication, that is different, I guess. But whales work. I'm assuming now that marine mammals are normally well funded compared to sharks. Sharks is just more challenging because people like to support other people, and people like to connect with certain species. It is challenging to get people to connect with sharks. So the funding are limited, and in my mind, if we get SharkSafe up off the ground to become a really nicely profitable company, then I can have enough money to support all the research on sharks that needed to be done. And I'm not saying it's going to be less stressful than doing an application, but it should work in the long term a lot better and allow for a lot more research to be sponsored.
Mm.
So but it took me a while. Yeah, it took me a while to get to take the reins of this, because it's very different from what I was envisioning. And you also, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I don't know how many other scientists will feel that way. But you feel like I grew up with the concept that I had my PhD, then you do maybe a couple of years as postdoc, then you get your position in the academic environment, you become a professor. I was expecting it as a very linear career. The moment you got your PhD, you become a doctor, then you're doing your research, and then the university will hire you. And maybe that was true maybe 20, 30 years ago, but it's no longer true. It's a lot more difficult than that these days. And I had this concept that the people that abandon the academic career to go into the business world was because they were not good enough at being academics. So I was feeling working on SharkSafe as a personal failure for not being a good scientist, which could also be true. How knows? But despite it took me so long to decide. Okay, now let's try and do both. There can be a benefit for the research if we build up a company ultimately.
Yeah, we've talked about that previously, and it's definitely something that I want to interrogate a little bit more with my network of scientists in Australia, because one of the things that we've been looking at and talk to people about is that the rate of marine research commercialization is really low. It's really low globally, and it's really low in Australia. So, thinking about how can we increase that? And I suppose the starting point for the thinking is that, well, we need to give scientists more skills around entrepreneurship. We need to give them the skills in addition to the science to make them feel comfortable to be great storytellers, great business people, to be able to bring the two together. But what you're saying is completely news to me, and I'm interested to know how wide that mindset is. What you're saying is that there's almost a shame, if you like, for leaving academia, or a sense of I don't know,
personal
shame might
failure.
be personal failure, because
yes. At
which
least
is
for
extraordinary.
Me, well, unless I'm the only one thinking that way, which is, sample size is key here. You must ask around. I'm probably the only one. But personally, I was, since I was a kid, I had this idea of, doing your doctorate and then you're doing science. Now I'm doing science, so the university will hire me to do more science and be in the academic environment. So stepping out of it to take care of marketing and clients and what business is about, it did felt like, I won't say ashamed, but it took me months to cope with it, to say, okay, it's not a bad idea. And I mean, the university actually pushed me in that direction at the best of their capability, but I wasn't listening. I was still feeling bad about it. They did try, they were giving a bursary specifically to commercialize SharkSafe. And they were supporting the business side specifically so that we can commercialize. And it still took me months to say, okay, I have to do that. There is no one else picking that up.
So you had your concerns. I definitely am, and in fact, if any researchers and scientists in the marine space are out there listening to this and have felt the same feeling that Sarah's described here, please reach out to me. I want to hear from you. I want to see how widespread this train of thought is.
You know what? When we sign off our IP to the university, because now we have 4 inventors of the SharkSafe Barrier, so we sign it off to the university, so they, because it turned out it cost a lot to patent the technology nationally and internationally. And in my mind at that stage was, great, I'm going to sign it off to the university. Then the university that has a commercialization branch, they're going to sell it. They're going to do the whole thing. We will just step back, get our royalties, and be scientists, like I wanted. And I didn't think I would have been involved into the commercialization of the technology whatsoever. So that came as a surprise as well, that I have to learn business. It was just so uncomfortable for me. But like I say, as I started, now I seriously started in 2017 really, there are positives on that. It is also finding out that the technology is not just to save the sharks, but it also has a positive impact for the local community. When I was in Reunion Island talking to the people there that had the problem with the sharks, realizing how traumatized these people are because they lost maybe a cousin or a friend that got bitten by a shark. So it becomes almost like a social mission beyond the ecological mission that started the whole story. You know?
Yeah, it's broadened your own perception of the impact, right? And
absolutely.
Well, let's talk about how well you're doing. I know you're a reluctant entrepreneur. You've just been telling us, but you know, you must be doing something well because you've just raised your first external investment, I believe. So congratulations for that. That's a big milestone.
Thank you. We will have a full force, release soon. But because you're working with the university still, they're also shareholder in the company. Every press release must be carefully thought of, and we are writing this up to give the big announcement. But yes, we got the first investor in, and it's exciting to have. We found a like-minded investor, someone that joined us because he loves sharks and he wants to solve the problem, and that's what exactly.
I think that's key, right, in this sort of space, the impact space. I mean, and that could be social, environmental, whatever impact space you're in. When you're starting off, I think it's so important to surround yourself with those people that are really, really, really heavily aligned with your mission, not just people that will write you a check, because you need that. You need patience. You need those people that will ride out those times when things aren't going well for you and will be there to support you as much as they can, because they're as connected to your higher level mission, not just profits, as they can possibly be. Sara, let's talk about what you want to try and do. You've raised some money. What does the next 12 to 24 months look like? What are your priorities during this period?
Well, I keep on telling myself that if I managed to do something right last year, 2020, with a startup, there is nothing that should scare me now from now on, because the 2020 wasn't the best year ever to do something. But in between the Pitchfest, being a finalist on the Pitchfest, and the funding that are coming, I think we're going to be busier and busier in the next 12 months. Because now our priority is, of course, land a sale to get installation built, and it will probably be founded by a combination of different entities in tourism, government, and probably overseas partners to do the first installation. And another thing is still working very closely with our partner in Reunion Island, the Shark Security Center, that 2 years ago wanted to test the barrier with their bull sharks. So they bought 200 of our pipes. We went overseas, we got them installed in Reunion. And the structure of these, just imagine a little square, is 10 meters by 10 meters on the inside, surrounded by the pipes. So they could also test it with their shark. Have been holding very well for 2 years without breakages on the pipe. So now we need to work with them and see if there is a chance to reuse the technology for protecting a beach. Then, of course, Australia, we received incredibly good support from the Humane Society International and Andre Borrell and his Envoy Shark Cull movie. So the idea is for the next few months is really focusing more outreach, get more people to know that the SharkSafe Barrier could be a good solution, get more people to know what the problem is, and eventually convince the government to pay for the installation. Easy. I just have to do that.
Easy.
Easy.
Oh, excellent. Well, look, it seems like everything's going in the right direction for you, and I couldn't be happier for you. This is badly needed. We know it's time. All of the elements are there, aren't they? It just sort of feels like, someone's brought all of the ingredients for dinner into the kitchen, and we've just somehow got to find the recipe to unlock this, right?
We just have to open the oven and start cooking it.
Hey, Sara, that's we're almost out of time, but actually, can I just go back to something you said earlier that I wanted to ask you about? You talked about almost stumbling upon the idea about the biomimicry, that being the idea that sharks wouldn't proceed through a kelp curtain,
Yes.
if you like. And I think you said that one of you was actually sitting in front of the kelp and realised the sharks wouldn't proceed. Was that a nervous moment when you started testing that out to sit there and see if they would proceed or not?
No, I would say, well, that guy was Mike Ratzen, and if you speak with a lot of spear fishermen in South Africa, they will also know that white sharks don't enter the thick forest of kelp. If the kelp is loose, there have been videos showing sharks going through the corridor that the kelp can form if it is very loose, so if the stalks are quite separated from each other. But inside the thick forest of kelp, they don't go. In fact, there is a whole different ecosystem with other top predators in there, and it is something well known in the spearfishing community. What Mike Ratzen the way his light bulb went on was thinking of building a fake forest of kelp to replace the nets. And I will ask him if he was there, was the first time, but personally, when the first time we built the barrier and we were in the water, you feel quite safe. And that is a feeling and the response I got from every other dive that came with us, and we had the white shark around. We got Sky News coming with Alex Crawford at some stage. She's an incredible journalist from the UK. And she dived with us, and we had this white shark around the barrier. We were right inside the square. And you just feel safe. You see the shark swimming by, and you feel that it's not going to cross it. And then, of course, we had to test it, and we had to film it, and we had the fish inside. But I won't say none of the people I talked to had the thought crossing their mind thinking, oh, the shark is not going to break through the pipes. It also has a lot to do with the way the sharks swim in reality compared to how the sharks are portrayed in movies. In the movies, you see them breaking through everything, eating boats and all of that CGI thing.
Perception.
But in reality, they just swim around very calmly. They can get curious, but they don't have these aggressive behavior that only Hollywood want us to show.
Yeah, that's definitely the impression I've had. I've been lucky enough to get down to Port Lincoln and out to the Neptune Islands a couple of times now, and my wife thought she was going to be scared out of her wits when I took her, and I think she said it was one of the greatest moments she's had in the wild. And I mean, for me, it definitely was. I mean, it is, because you're right. It's absolute calmness when they come past you. There's a real sense of calm and an aura that you're with an animal that is just quite extraordinary.
And they've been here for millions of years. It will be such a shame for the next generation of humans to not have the chance to encounter.
Yeah.
White shark in particular.
That's why I'm so glad that people like you, Sarah, are doing what you're doing, and why we're so happy to promote and celebrate and create a lot of awareness around what you're doing, because we need these solutions. We need innovators like you to ensure that sharks are around for a hell of a lot longer, so that our kids, grandkids and future generations can enjoy them, and that we can reap the benefits of them being at the top of the ocean ecosystem. We need it as much as anything else. So thank you for doing all that you're doing. It's been so great to talk to you today, and keep in touch. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Excellent.
Thanks, Sarah.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks. Bye.